thank you for stepping in at the last minute. I explained to everybody what was going on, so thank you for doing this and braving the rain. Millie is part of our speakers, and so she has her notes, and so she's going to present. Millie, let us give a warm welcome to Millie.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. First and foremost, I represent the Navajo and Blackfeet Nations here in Arizona. I was born and raised. I'm also part of a group known as the Alianza Indígena Sin Fronteras. In English, that is the Indigenous Alliance Without Borders. First and foremost, I would like to read our land acknowledgement statement. The Alianza Indígena Sin Fronteras is situated on the unceded territories of the Tohono Nation. The Alianza Indígena Sin Fronteras acknowledges the 22 native nations as well as unrecognized peoples that are the original peoples of what we call Arizona today. We further acknowledge the 17 tribal nations directly impacted by the U.S.-Mexico border. We also recognize the interconnectedness of land, people, the environment, water, animals, and plant life, and the rocks and mountains. They are our relatives and elders. We recognize their rights and peoplehood. Without them, we would not exist. With that being said, just a little bit about our organization. Our mission is to educate about Indigenous peoples' rights and about conflicts, constructively advocate on public policy measures, and document human rights abuses. So a lot of our different events that we put on aim to promote those kind of things. We actively outreach to and coalition build with Indigenous, non-Indigenous organizations, communities, and social justice campaigns. We advocate for the protection of sacred sites along the border and beyond. We facilitate Know Your Rights workshops and community forums. We promote respect for and protection of Indigenous mobility rights. And through educational teach-ins, action trainings, decolonial cultural projects, youth mentoring, and ceremony as collective direct action, our advocacy addresses how Indigenous peoples can respond to issues themselves. There are 17 tribes that are directly affected by the border. Those include the Pascua Yaqui tribe, the Yaqui in Mexico, the Tohono Nation, the Tohono Nation in Mexico, Cocopah Indian tribe, Gila River Indian community, Acoma Otham, Pai Pai, Kumawabi, Lipan Apache, Humo Apache, Quechan, Tenga, Kickapoo, Mescalero Apache, and the Hualapai Nations. With that being said, I forgot to mention, I actually just earned my PhD from the University of Arizona in American Indian Studies, and I have my business card that I'll hand out to you all. If you go to the website, I have a lot of information. My dissertation research was, I opted for a manuscript-based dissertation, so I wrote 4 manuscripts. The first one looks at population, and I studied the censuses back to 1920. And then the second one looks at the districts, the 2013 districts to 2023, and how those demographics look and how they changed. And then I looked at representation all the way back to 1973. I was telling the gentleman here that before 1973, districts were allocated per county. And so after 1973 is when they became unrestricted to the counties, and so that's why I kind of went back that far in Arizona. And then lastly, I looked at the 40 pieces of voting legislation that were passed by the 55th Arizona State Legislature. I have information and links to all of that information, including all of the pieces of legislation that were passed from 2021 to 2022. It's available for free on my website. But I am also a proud member of the Alianza. I've been with them since 2018, and we have a lot of exciting things that are going on at our organization. First off, I am doing civic engagement workshops. I just did one this morning from 10 to 11:30. I'm going to be doing another one next Saturday from 10 to 11:30. And then on the 25th, or actually on the 26th, Saturday the 26th, I'll be doing a live one Same time, 10 to 11:30, and that will be at the Alliance for Global Justice Center in Tucson. It's located off 26th Street, right by Minadito restaurant. I don't know if you guys have ever been there. It's like really good. But President Clinton was there. It's so this Saturday and then the next 2 Saturdays. And we'll have all the videos listed up on our website. But today's talk was about a census overview. Next week, I'm going to be talking about the districts, federal, state legislative, and county districts and how those changed. And then finally, the week after that, we'll be looking at representation and what that means in terms of the voting legislation that was passed by the 55th Arizona State Legislature. So those will be available on our website. Next, we started a podcast that's run by our executive. Her name is Lourdes Escalante. She's the one who asked me to be here today. And also our intern, their name is J.S. Torres. They launched this on Wednesday, which is really exciting. Our first interview was with Jose Malvado, and he talked about Indigenous identity in terms of federal recognition, and how maybe because of blood quantum rules, or because they were born, because Indigenous people were born sometimes without birth certificates. That happens a lot in Arizona, which I didn't realize until I started doing civic engagement at senior centers. I didn't realize that there was a lot of our seniors, elders, that grew up on the reservations that didn't have birth certificates. It's hard sometimes for Indigenous people to prove their identity, but nonetheless, they still persevere, and Jose talked about that in our last episode. Our next episode is going to be commemorating the International Day of World Indigenous Women, and for that it says that although Indigenous Day of World Indigenous People is Tuesday, September 5th, we will release this episode on September 3rd, because the Alianza is coordinating and sponsoring another event. This podcast will feature Plant Cruiser and their efforts in helping sustain land defenders, Mother Earth protectors, and their values. So it's honoring Indigenous women. We also have another event coming up to honor Indigenous women. That will be on Tuesday, September 5th, in the evening time at the Loft Cinema. But we will be sponsoring a video known as Powerlands, and also another video called Voices of the Grand Canyon. Again, this is going to be on Tuesday, September 5th. We have a speaker. Her name is Christina Andrews. She is Hiached Autumn, and we hope to get a flyer out soon. We haven't made one yet. And then finally, our biggest announcement is our 9th annual Indigenous Peoples Day commemoration. This is an event that was started by our founder, Jose, and it's going to be on Monday, October 9th. It's an all-day event at the Center for Global Justice. We're going to be having danza and hopefully gourd singers and a whole bunch of booths for people to share their art and also their messages. And I'm hoping to have a voter registration drive there too, to try to increase voter registration for natives and for anyone who attends. Finally, we did have a passing of one of our members. His name was Dr. Roberto Simply Rodriguez. We are still in the process of honoring his life and legacy, the advocacy work that he did for the Alianza community and also for the Tucson community, and that will be more to come on that. We have the Indigenous Archives Without Borders, and that is a project that Lourdes, Dr. Gonzalez, Joel Perez, J.S. Torres, and Rita Madrid. And what they are doing is they are working to continue the archival process of recording Indigenous storytellers and their stories. So we're working a lot with the elders here along the border and then also in Mexico. So with that, if you have any questions.
Tell us a little bit of what plant cruisers are. Can you do that?
Plant cruisers are people who, they go around and they look at the wildlife and how it's impacted by the border. But yeah, it's just people walking around. Cruising around.
And there's something to do with the Thriving Aunties program. Is that some?
Thriving Aunties, that was not included in our update, so that might be something that's
Brand new.
in the works. Yeah, because I was told not to read anything about our grant updates because they haven't been, like the grants haven't been approved yet. They're still in the planning process of those. So that might be one of the things that.
And I know Doris is working hard on those. Yeah.
Yeah, she does have a lot of grants. She has a Mellon grant, a philanthropy grant, a Kindle grant, a Ford grant, and the Indigenizing Archival grant that they're actively working on right now. They haven't been distributed yet, though. Did you have a question, sir?
How do you spell Alianza?
Alianza. Alianza.
And it means what?
Alliance.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's the Alianza Indígena, which is indigenous, sin fronteras, so without borders. Yeah, so indigenous, I say it in English all the time. I don't speak Spanish, but it's Indigenous Alliance Without Borders.
It's not in the Diné language?
No, it's
Spanish?
yeah, no, but we do recognize the Mexican clan. They're called Nakai Diné, and my mom, one of her 4 clans is Nakai Diné. But yeah, we do recognize them. Yes? Oh, right behind you. Okay, I'm sorry.
What time is the first film at the Loft Cinema on September 5th?
The September 5th Loft Center, I did not get a time for that. Yeah, I was kind of wondering that too, because it's September 5th. Most of them start around 6 o'clock, I know. It's not on here for some reason, but I would guess like around 6 o'clock. If you want to, yeah, I can give you
Your
the
website?
number. Yeah, it's 520-795-0844.
Now that all of the tribes, I guess, in the Southwest have gained some rightful say in the allocation of water from the Colorado River, is Allianz involved in any way in the formulation of plans, or can you speak to that at all?
No, although we work with tribal members, like I'm a member of the Navajo Nation, we don't work with tribes directly, and to my knowledge we haven't really ever officially worked with them in any capacity. But our main focus is usually on advocating for migratory rights of Indigenous peoples crossing the borders, and then advocating for the protection of sacred places along the border as well. But yeah, that's a really good point. That's a hot issue in politics right now.
Honor, Honor, healing our nations and offering resilient collective. With as many tribes, as many nations as you have, with many different languages, is there sometimes a barrier when you're doing voter outreach?
Yeah, and Honor Collective is a separate group.
Right.
That's run by Melody Lopez. That's an Indigenous women's group that started in Tucson, and they do a lot of advocacy work for missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, and then like in matriarchy kind of work. It's very centered on Indigenous women, but that's the Honor Collective.
That's the Honor, okay.
Yeah, and we partner with them a lot. I know that Melody Lopez is one of our friends from the Alianza, and we co-sponsor events together. But speaking about Indigenous peoples in general, yeah, just like the first episode that on the podcast that they did on Wednesday, that's available on YouTube. Yeah, there's a lot of Indigenous peoples. There's 22 here from Arizona, and there's also groups that are not recognized, like the Hia Said O'odham peoples by Arizona, and then also the O'odham Druid peoples are some of the people that I know, and then the Lipan Apache that live along Nogales. And then we have a urban native population of people, like I'm Blackfeet, my dad's Blackfeet, and so he came here because of relocation. So even though my mom's Navajo, we have I'm Blackfeet. So there's a lot of people who are JS, she's Lakota. So yeah, there's a lot of Native peoples living in the urban areas that are from tribes not even in Arizona.
That moved here from other
Yeah,
locations.
that do help us in our organization and our efforts.
Or somebody else had a question? Yes.
Yeah, could you tell me about your storyteller group or
That is the Indigenous Archives Without Borders. And for information about that, you would go to indigenousalliance.org. And I believe they have a few of the stories available. The one that I listened to was in Spanish, and I had to read the text on the bottom. Yeah, I don't speak Spanish. But they're working on getting other Indigenous speakers from like Guatemala, Honduras, and then here in the United States too. The stories are about whatever they want to speak. It's no set thing. It's just mainly like, hi, what's your story of Indigenous identity in your country, and is there anything special that you'd want to share with us? But there's no specific topic. We wouldn't. I don't think we've ever asked elders to. Oh, I think the one in the back right there.
Do you have any more current information about what's going on along the border with the autumn that's dividing the tribe? Have there been any changes? I mean, I know that was a big deal when the former administration wanted to put that 20-foot wall across there. Are they still having to fight to make sure nothing is done to separate them, or?
Yeah, and the bigger issue was what happened in Cocopah, because they are along the border as well, and their reservation along the border, unlike the O'odham, which has like 62 miles of borderlands, the Cocopah Indian tribe has about like 5, and it's in Yuma. And I know that Governor, I forget what his name was, the last governor.
Ducey.
So yeah, Governor Ducey. I knocked that name out of my head.
We all tried.
Yeah, he put those containers there, and I believe that they might still be there.
No, they're not.
Oh, they're gone?
They moved them. I saw something at the loft a month or so ago where they talked, and there were 3 documentaries, and one of them was a Native group that did one, and they said, how they did get them out because it just took a few hundred people to show up and say stop, and they got them out, and now they're up to 2, so I'm trying to figure out what to do with them.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been in the library writing my dissertation for the last 2 years, so I'm sorry. Yeah, but thanks for the update, because I was wondering about that.
Yeah, that way, and it costs millions of dollars that we as Arizonans are paying for that whole stupid idea of this.
I know, that was ridiculous.
Now, you said not recognized. How does someone get recognized? Is it a smaller group or urban people that are not recognized? Is it recognized by the state, by the feds?
There are 2 groups of Native peoples in the United States, and those are state recognized and federally recognized. There's 574 federally recognized tribes. That process is approved by Congress. The last tribe that I know of that gained federal recognition was actually given by President Trump through executive order, and that was in Virginia. And he recognized, I think, a couple of different nations in the state of Virginia. Before that, there was only 11 state-recognized tribes in Virginia. And only 2 of those nations have land, and 7 of them are federally recognized. But President Trump, he did authorize the federal recognition of some of those tribes in Virginia. Here in Arizona, the last tribe to gain federal recognition was the Pasquayaqui tribe. And on September 16th, that's their recognition days. And so they have a big, huge thing in New Pasqua and also Old Pasqua. But yeah, that September 16th, 1978 was when they gained their federal recognition. And that was the last tribe in Arizona.
What does it mean if they're not recognized? What does it mean?
They're not eligible for any of the benefits that we offer to enrolled members. So we do have Indian Health Services, which is something that's big here in Arizona because we have a lot of Indian health clinics. It's not something so much like in Missouri, even though they do have the OTO there that are federally recognized, they just don't have as many IHS clinics. But in a state that has a lot of Indian health services, And then also Native services. In order to qualify for those services, you have to be a member of a federally recognized tribe. There are state services that are offered for, like in the state of Virginia. There are state services, special scholarships and other things like that where you would have to prove you're state recognized, like you're a member of one of those tribes. It's just about like services mainly. But yeah, good question. And then you had a question?
Yes, I did. I had two.
Oh, yes.
One is how many indigenous people are there in Arizona? And two, did you grow up in the Navajo land?
I was born in Tuba City, but that was just because my mom was bound and determined to have me born in the Four Sacred Mountains. So she went into labor in Phoenix. I was almost born on the I-17. My dad got off of work. He was working at Honeywell. He got off of work. He's like, "Where's my wife?" And then, "You're in Tuba?" And like, so if you look at my early pictures, my dad's like really tired. He's like sitting there holding me. But yeah, I was born in Tuba City. And then my dad's Blackfeet. So what happened with that was in the 1950s, there was a movement to terminate tribes. In that effort, they were paying individual tribal members to leave the reservation. And so they actually paid my grandma to leave the Blackfeet reservation, which was a no-brainer for her because she was like, "Oh, okay, leave the rest. Like, there's nothing here for me." So she wanted to go anyway. And so she was happy to move. We ended up settling in the Phoenix area. And yeah, I was raised in Mesa with my dad. And then what was your other question?
How many indigenous people are there in Arizona?
There are, to my knowledge, there are no state recognized tribes in Arizona, but there are 22 federally recognized tribes.
But how many people?
Oh, in the census? Okay, so for that, we could go to Red Data Consulting. It's one word, REDDATA consulting.com. And I have here a tab listed. If you go to the U.S. Census data, I have the native populations per tribe, and then also as a state, and then per county. And so if you go to the second one, which says native populations, it says here that in the state of Arizona, there are a total of 453,560 natives living in Arizona, or that identify as American Indian Alaska Native in the U.S. 2020 census.
I can tell we have a college student here, can get around to her. There's another question. Ellen?
What's the name of the podcast that you mentioned?
Yes, so the podcast is, if you go to YouTube, because we just did we just had our first episode, and that was on Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. It was like a really big achievement for Lourdes and JS, who had put that together. So it is on the Indigenous Alliance. That's the name of the YouTube page. And the name of the podcast is IPWB, so Indigenous Podcast Without Borders. Kind of a play on our name. IPWB, Indigenous People, or Indigenous Podcast Without Borders.
Yeah, I urge you to go to Google and look up IABW because there's a lot of good articles out there just to sit and read. Brian?
Two quick ones, actually. First, can you pronounce the name of the land that was set aside recently by President Biden along the Grand Canyon?
No.
Nobody else can, including him.
It's like in Hualapai, I think.
And secondly, culturally, is it appropriate now that you would still recognize your mother's clan, and do you go by that nomenclature as well?
Yes, I didn't do my traditional, the traditional Navajo greeting, which would be on Bitterwater clan, born for the Blackfeet Nation. My great-grandmothers were Tachiti, which is their forehead are red people, and they came from Lukachukai, Arizona. And then my great-grandfather, my name is Millicent Pepion, that's all French. Millicent Michel Pepion. My great-grandfather was a French fur trader, and his name was Aloysius Pepion, so I say Bilagana. But yeah, So I'm French Canadian as well.
Wow.
Well, we'd like to hear your genealogy research on that one, yes.
President Biden created a national monument, so
Right.
that it would have that in the name of whatever he created, national monument.
I looked it up the other day and I can't pronounce it. Can't believe it again. Anybody
Yeah.
else? Rich?
Yeah, how much of a percentage of Native American blood, for lack of a better term, do you need to be a tribal member?
So that's individually written into each one of the constitutions. Some tribes have it set, like the Blackfeet Nation has it set at 1/3. And so that's why I'm not really eligible for membership in the Blackfeet Nation, because I'm like just under 1/3. The Navajo Nation has theirs set at 1/4. So if my children don't have children with Navajo people, we're going to be X'd out. My grandchildren aren't going to be eligible for membership as the Constitution stands now, which is why I take them around Navajo people. I'm joking. And then there's the Cherokee Nation. You just had to be on the Dawes Enrollment Act. So if they did a census, I think it was in 1800s right before they did the land run. And if your grandparents or anyone that you can prove from your direct lineage was part of that, then you're eligible for membership. So I attended Haskell Indian Nations University. I sat with students who were literally like 1/500th Native Cherokee by blood. And then, yeah, it just depends on the
Is
tribe.
that determined by genetic testing now with genes or history or?
Well, when I was studying, like when I was looking at the census, the United States has always been very interested in how many natives are here. And so even before Arizona was considered a territory in 1860, when we were part of the New Mexico Territory, there was an extensive study on how many natives existed per tribe that they could distinguish. And so there's a lot of census information regarding the tribes. And then also, interestingly, the Mormon Church, they have a genealogy library located in Mesa. Anybody could go there and utilize it for free. The librarians there are very helpful. But yeah, if you put in your mother's name and your father's name, and if you're Native American especially, they have extensive research about that. So that's how my dad, he wanted us to actually be a part of the Blackfeet Nation. And he used the Mormon Church Genealogy Center to find our genealogy, and then that's when it was determined that he's a little less than 66%. It kind of backfired on him, but it was determined he's a little less than 66%. We're 33% French Canadian and a little bit of Irish. But yeah, I'm actually a little less than 1/3 Blackfeet. But there's been extensive studies for Native peoples since like every time they've come and moved west to one of these states, there's been extensive surveys done for Native peoples here.
Are they using any DNA?
No, they don't go by DNA. They go by the lineage, by who your parents are. And when you register, like when I registered my children and I got them enrolled in the tribe, I had to actually list my 4 clans. So I had to put on there Bitterwater, Blackfeet, Totochitni, and French Canadian. They do it like that was for the Navajo Nation Enrollment Office. I don't know how the other 21 nations do it here in Arizona though.
And they set their standards based on their nation.
Yeah, and it's written in the Constitution, like usually as one of the first sections of the Constitution. And all of the constitutions, if you did want to research how natives are quantifying the blood relations, that's available on the Native Nations website. They have documented all of the constitutions, including like updates to the Constitution. They do that pretty regularly.
How many colleagues in the graduate school are there in your department? What's the name of the department?
I graduated, but I was in the Department of American Indian Studies. Not that many. There was only about, I think, like 30 PhD students. I was around the 68th or 70th person that graduated from our program. It's been around since 1980. So it's a really small program at the University of Arizona. And then we have other master's students and undergraduates. Those are a little bit bigger, but I don't think it exceeds 1,300 or 300. And then for the whole total, there's, I looked at the enrollment information for last year. There was like around 1,300 Native students that attended the University of Arizona last year. And those were across all different departments.
What tribe is your husband associated with?
The Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. So so if my children don't have babies with the Navajo or Blackfeet, then the Choctaw Nation, they're like the Cherokee Nation, and they go by the Dawes enrollment. So, however, they're eligible for membership through there. But he's about an 8th Choctaw, so my kids would be the 16th, but they would still be eligible for Indian Health Services.
Where in the world did you meet him?
Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. We
Yeah,
appreciate
no
that.
problem.
Oh, our pleasure.
And thank you guys for all the work that you're doing here in Green Valley. It was a really honor to be here today and to meet all of you. And yeah, I'll go ahead and walk around and give you guys my business card. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and follow up with me there. And feel free to check out my website. I have a district study and the census study if you go to the little tab. So thank you again.